I thought sensitivity was a weakness.
What are the most effective ways to build connection and relationship skills in men?
I recognise that they hurt too. And there's an inner boy there that's been really badly damaged. The central theme of that is connection. Men don't want to talk about it. It's not true. Men will talk about things so incredibly quickly, with a safe space.
Before we begin today, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're recording on, the Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to elders past and present and recognise the strength, resilience and ongoing contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across this country. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. All right, let's get into it. Today's guest is John Rich, Chairperson of Men's Health and Wellbeing WA. John has spent more than 16 years working on the front line of social services, supporting people through addiction, domestic violence, prison re-entry, family mental health, and Aboriginal emotional well-being. Before that, he spent 30 years working across engineering and large-scale industry with companies like BHP and Theus. What makes John's perspective so unique is that he understands both the pressure men are expected to perform under and the emotional world many men have been taught to shut down. Today, we'll discuss men's mental health, emotional suppression, relationship breakdown, and what actually helps men reconnect, not just with others, but with themselves. Welcome to Shit Sparked. Proudly supported by our seasonal sponsors, Coach Carly, Elevate Bianco, and Your Recovery. All right, well, let's get into it. Hi, John. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Paris. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, we've been trying to make this happen for a while. But we got there. We're here now.
Good to be here, and thanks for persevering in the work you do.
Thank you so much, John. Well, we'll get straight into it, and I'll start off with the first question. So can you tell us a bit about your journey to what led you to the space of men's mental well-being?
Hey, I mean, it's, it kind of feels like a journey I've been traveling all my life, really. Certainly sort of growing up in a stereotypical way, realising I was good at science and that became my career as opposed to, and I enjoyed it. I did. I met a darling woman and had 3 kids and blown away by being a dad. I realised within that, though, that I wasn't actually really pursuing my own goals and the things that I wanted to do. And it was actually recognising, it's actually a version of cognitive behaviour therapy, that I was living all the time with a negative internal dialogue that kind of sneered at me and said, you can't help yourself, John. How could you ever help other people? And I realised there was lots of indications where I could. And so I resigned from, after this particular epiphany, I resigned from the organisation I was working for and went back to university and studied counselling. And it changed my life. It opened up an understanding of people. It changed my relationships. The world in many ways came to life. And I think within that, my own journey of feeling estranged in relationships, of not being able to be as good a dad as I could have been, was coming back to me in many, many men's testimonies of their own life, wanting to know how to love the people in their life.
Yes.
And I think the passion and the frustrations, and maybe the missed opportunities has added a level of passion that makes me do the work that I do today, largely in a voluntary capacity.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that, John. I can't wait to actually get into that a bit further. That was great. So you're now the chairperson of Men's Health and Wellbeing WA. So for people who haven't heard of the peak body before, what does it do and why is it needed?
Well, a peak body is an unusual but a very important organisation to focus specifically on men's health. The Men's Health Peak Body ideally is to advocate and to advocate for men's health, including policy and funding and basically programs, throughout the sector to try and promote the health and well-being of men and boys. in Australia. The peak bodies for various organisations, for instance, Men's Sheds, there is a peak body that looks after all the men's sheds, or it doesn't look after them, but it actually provides support to multiple men's sheds, 180 here in Western Australia. So in effect, the peak body for men's health in Western Australia it isn't a service provider, but ideally it would be supporting the health and wellbeing of men and boys in Western Australia, as well as ideally the people that they love and that are in their circle.
Yeah. Do you mind breaking that down even a little bit further and kind of giving me a bit of a visual on, how you guys assist these organisations that are helping young men and men's mental health?
There's multiple ways with which we do that. One of the big things is around connection and identifying the services that are available. I mean, more recently, 16 years after we published the first time, we came up with the Blokes book.
The Blokes book, okay.
So if you look within that, you see multiple agencies, contact details, and little quirks that actually sort of show and support men in their journey that help to validate their experience. Young blokes, and oftentimes men don't necessarily want to be carrying great big lumpy things around with them. So we've got a pocket Blokes book that packs up nice and neatly into a wallet.
A wallet, nice.
So certainly providing contact details for organisations that can support. There are multiple organisations around Western Australia that don't always have publicity, a lot of which are actually voluntary. And so our endeavour is to make sure that as many people as possible are made aware of those.
Right.
Bring them together multiple times in the year to talk with each other and understand what else is happening within them, and then identify where the gaps are within the sector and look at ways that we can tap into other services that are happening in the eastern states. I'm also on the National Peak Body Australian Men's Health Forum as a director, and I'm also a director on the Global Action on Men's Health, which is across the globe, and looking at their endeavours in other countries and how we might be able to support the progress of men's health here in Western Australia.
It's incredible.
Tapped into these other amazing practitioners across the globe.
That's amazing. That sounds so fascinating as well. It must be very interesting work that you're doing.
Passionate people, I mean, certainly in all sectors of the human resources and community, but it's great to see people and know who and meet people that have been doing this work for 50 plus years, the dedication, the passion and the and meet the men that have started down this process, and whether they've started or not started. Men are beautiful, and men are flawed.
As we all are.
And within that, it's we owe a huge debt to the women in our lives. 85% of the people that do men's health in the world are women. In fact, women are so significant in my life, have been over the years, and certainly into the future. And so this is full credit to the brilliant stuff that we get from women all the time in terms of support and so it's there is some good things. There's more to come, of course, and all sorts of things that men are trying to overcome.
Yeah, and I love that you guys are even looking overseas to get inspiration or influence from what they're doing in other countries. I think that's really, really cool.
It's actually great. I mean, men's sheds are certainly aimed at a small percentage of the population, the older percentage of the population, but they're brilliant in many respects. And via the Australian Men's Health Forum, the men's sheds are popping up in other countries of the world.
Yeah, that's so good.
So there's some things here in Australia that have Western Australia that have popped up in the eastern states, and so that cross-fertilisation is a great way to tap into valuable initiatives, things that work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So what are you seeing in men's mental health right now that most people aren't? I mean, that's a very broad question, but it's probably quite a few things that you're seeing.
I mean, the statistics continue to indicate that men are struggling. 75% of suicides are males.
Yeah.
Men don't report mental health distress until it's at crisis levels. I hear a lot of men that talk about being in relationships and not knowing, having the capacity to be able to have rich connections and to be able to love the people in their life, to understand what's going on. And so there's a lot of distress about that. And I think the Fathering Project issued some results not that long ago wherein men continue to believe the best that they can offer their children is an income.
Yes. Yeah, because I've always wondered where that has stemmed from initially, the struggle that men have to connect like emotionally. And I'm like, because I know like the men in my life, like a lot of them are in that space, like where they just can't connect or they don't know how to, they don't even know first steps. But then when I look at like, their fathers and I look at the men in their lives, they're the same. And it just seems like it's been this trickle down through generations where that hasn't changed and it just keeps continuing on. I don't know if that's something that you've been seeing as well, but that's what I've experienced like firsthand in my own family.
I think that's so very true. And Terry Apter wrote about this, the Guy Code, and recognised that the Girl Code isn't nearly as strict as the Guy Code, and it's strictly enforced by siblings and by families. You can't wear nail polish, and you've got to be careful what colour clothes you wear when you go to your primary school. Otherwise, the code will be enforced when you get into the school playground. So we've got an incredibly strict stereotype that kicks in early. It's enforced by our loved ones and enforced by the schoolyard and our education system. In some respects, not seeing so many male teachers, but our colleagues and our whole community is enforcing this restriction, and it takes away so many years, or it restricts men's opportunities in so many years of their life. And I think this is the thing that men at 40s and 50 years of age start to recognise that they need to do something different. They want to do something different. They want to take ownership of their life rather than be strictured by a stereotype that is so powerful. And so somehow men succumb to this stereotype and don't push back. Having said that, it's a tough whole process in terms of the strictures with which other men enforce this code is testimony to how ubiquitous it is and how restricting it is in terms of men, their behaviour, their capacity for relationships, their learning about social and emotional well-being and strategies, and ultimately living their own values rather than somebody else's values.
Yeah. And you were mentioning before just on stereotype. Do you mind explaining that a little bit more, like what that stereotype is?
The stereotype starts early in the Guy Code. Research shows that it's particularly more strict than it is for the Girl Code. What it does is it has it stipulates certain behaviour which is acceptable and which isn't acceptable. It enforces a level of stoicism and boys don't cry and get on with it, and competitiveness, which contributes, not that sport's a problem, but there's a competitiveness within the culture. Somehow or other, by the time adolescents are in the final years of school, they're recognising that a good display of their masculinity and their acceptability to society is the income that they earn. And this reinforces the situation. Oftentimes the high income careers are careers that don't require emotional, social intelligence.
Right, yes.
And so what happens is, in fact, I worked in construction, I worked in engineering, I worked in a range of heavily male sort of dominated careers for 30 years. And in fact, any semblance or any indication of being of not living up to a certain code is an invitation for bullying. And so what's happened is we create a career which is focused on low emotional intelligence, and after 20, 30 years, what happens is we get used to working, I say this side of my brain because this is what I'm doing all day long, to the point that when I started my counselling degree, it took me ages to be able to wake up this side of my brain to start to recognise, because it was almost like hearing a different language. Right, it wasn't like, what are you feeling? It was like, what are you talking about? It's almost like a different language, and to wake that up and to start to understand the concepts isn't quite as simple as actually reading about emotions and the impact that emotions have in the whole process of formulating a level of self-awareness and what is my values.
That's really interesting. You've actually gave me a lot of food for thought, even just around some of the men in my life at the moment. I didn't really think about, I guess, the type of work that men are in that are restricting them from, I guess, being more aware of their own emotions or more in touch with them. Like, I guess, when you look at a lot of the men's work, it's very like laboured roles, and it just felt like a bit of a light bulb moment for me when you said that, actually.
It's interesting to see that women are choosing more jobs that are based on ideology.
Yeah.
And it's not because men haven't got ideologies, but I think, I'm not quite sure exactly how that sits, where men seem to kind of cop this stereotype a little bit with a little bit less resistance than women that are actually establishing a level of ideology and choosing a job which sits with their values, as opposed to men choosing a job which sits with earning an income, as much as earning an income is obviously an incredibly important part of what we need to do in our society, and a gift. It doesn't mean we have to suddenly sort of give away high-paid jobs, but it does invite the opportunity to say, maybe I need to take 10% off my commitment, recognise that I need to go into a different part of my kind of being, and then spend time with my children at school assemblies and pick them up from school one day a week or something like that, and then just plug into the beauty of bubbly, exciting children, as opposed to getting home from work at 6:30 when they've wound right down and they're ready for bed, showers, and homework and these sorts of things.
So that intentional connection with the kids,
add value time and wrestle with the boss to make up the time some other part of the working week.
Yeah, okay. You've given me a lot to think about, and this is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation. There's a lot of men in my life that I would say are suffering, and it helps me to understand better, like, on how I can even help them in that capacity, because I do think we can all help each other in a better way than what we are now. So we'll get more into that soon. So when we look at the data, and we did touch on this just briefly, here in Australia, men account for around 3/4 of all suicide deaths from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare reports. So what is it about being a man in today's society, so present, that's contributing to that?
My understanding is 50% of suicides in non-Indigenous are subsequent to relationship breakup, and 85% in the Indigenous community is subsequent to relationship breakup.
Wow, okay. So they've been connected to relationships.
There's lots of indicators around mental health and violence. I mean, people with mental health issues aren't violent, but people that are violent often have mental health issues.
Yes.
And, and it's important not to be pointing towards people with mental health issues, but it's important not to be ignoring mental health and the presence of mental health in people that resort to violence. My understanding of this is that it stems largely from the stereotypes which stricture men away from building a level of emotional intelligence. It pushes towards competitiveness and keeping and being disconnected, if you like, or not connected on a deep level. And when you think of a man coming home from a heavy duty left brain, task focused work, and meeting a person that's been doing an ideological career or been looking after kids and got a whole range of other issues, there is a merging of two different types of thought processes in that. And,
absolutely, yeah.
And the fundamentals of relationship skills isn't really inherent in our system, and so that makes it a struggle in terms of our communication, in terms of our relationships, in terms of our parenting, in terms of our disciplining our children, and that then results in reduced mental health struggles, and contributes to miscommunication and relationship breakdown. So my sense of this is that there isn't the supporting processes in place for men via the mainstream social services. They are not reported.
Yeah.
And even just a survey of a small number of the large social services, over $500 million of revenue to these social services don't report the percent men that actually access these services. We know from three agencies, Headspace, that they have 22% of their attendees are males.
Wow.
I believe it's less than that for the mainstream. So the ratio is somewhere around 4 or 5, maybe even 6 to 1, females to male, taking advantage of. It's way more than $500 million just in Western Australia, social services, and they're not reported. The percent of attendees are not reported. The invitation might well be that if they were reported, then there might be a question as to why is that percentage so different?
Yes, yeah. And I mean, it's something that I've often thought about, and I don't know, and I know probably maybe even some women could relate to this, but a lot of the times, with a lot of men in my life, I mean, I've had 2 men in my life who've sadly committed suicide and have passed. And for those particular people, it came down to not being able to communicate what was going on for them, and they were suffering internally, on their own. And it was very an isolating experience for them. But then there's so many times that I guess even for myself, there's a lot of women in my life who I would say they have quite high emotional intelligence, and they'll go to the lengths and the efforts to try and educate maybe their partner or their father or friends, and try and help them understand their own emotional well-being a little bit more, but then still not getting through. And there's this type of frustration that comes with that. I mean, how can we best help our men in those situations where maybe they are suffering silently and aren't coming forth or communicating properly what's going on internally for them?
I'll just finish what I was saying a bit earlier. Just a thought that's come to me. I don't want to be blaming social services sector for the ratio of who attends them. What I think it invites for us is to consider where men do get their support.
Yes,
and they do get support, and I'm particularly curious about the small groups. I'm part of 8 men's groups before I realised, just in Fremantle, unsung, unfunded, passionate about catching up with other men.
I love that.
Men do reach out, but more men could reach out and be connected. So I certainly don't want to. So I'm interested in how men are connecting and how we can support that connection that is happening, rather than be blaming the social services sector if the percentages are different. Men will seek out what works for them, and think, yeah, what a great question. How do you reach out to men? There's a range of ideas, and men want to know about building skills. Maybe it's because they're tasked with left brain sort of tasks during the day, but they don't necessarily get confused about the idea of actually understanding emotions and that sort of thing. So it's about making sure that there's task focus. There's different techniques. Meeting men where men are is another one that presents itself all the time, and that is not just meeting men where men are geographically, but meeting men where men are in terms of their culture and the words and the language they use. In the work that I've done, and I hope this doesn't sound patronising, but I meet men with such amazing intelligence and from all walks of life. Steel cap boots, white collars. Men will oftentimes move and take on a task if they're helping somebody else, if they're helping a mate.
Right.
And in the process of helping a mate, they're more likely then to be able to get some level of help themselves.
Okay.
It's a question that I think we yet to fully get to the bottom of how to actually get to men. I think as much as anything else, there's a lot more media which entrenches the stereotype, but there's a lot of media that actually challenges the stereotypes. And having people in high profile positions opening up and talking about the significance of sharing, being connected, and not necessarily having to talk about feelings, but in the process of connection, then cures happen. And the other aspect of large social services sector is that 85%, this is an approximation of the employees are women.
Right, okay.
And as much as women as practitioners and therapists are hugely valuable, there's a validation that happens when a man acknowledges, that your vulnerability is okay. I've had vulnerability too. It's okay to have vulnerability.
Yes.
So there's an essential step within that where a woman can support in so many ways, but having a man in the equation, or I believe even actually say, well, remember the particular man and his disclosure and the fact that vulnerability is something that, and tears and the love that he has for his kids, I think a big aspect of that too is when you get men to talk about their mums or their daughters, because a lot of men have daughters, and when you start talking about that, then it just opens up that soft side, and there's not the same pressures, I don't think, around stereotypes and the fear that my son's going to get bullied and these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So it helps to open up this huge thing, and then is you're recognising that men. What's the saying? There's more difference within the genders than there is between the genders.
Yes.
And it's a bit shocking because straight away we are instilling in our behaviour with our sons a difference to that of our daughters. So it's a bit of a stark reminder, but a valuable reminder that our boys need humanity.
Yes.
Boys are entitled to humanity as much as our girls are.
Yeah. And, as you were talking, it was making me think about, because I have my business, Your Recovery, which is one-on-one peer support work with people who are going through like addiction challenges. And I'm helping them move through that, whether it's the sobriety pathway or it's, harm reduction. So one of the things I was thinking about was I was starting to get more men coming through. And even with this podcast, I'm probably at 40% men and then 60% female. And I just thought, I really want to get more men involved, but I don't want it to be, me as a woman, like just, helping these men one-on-one. Of course, like I play a part, but I think it would be like amazing to have other men like who can kind of lead the way and be a role model as well, because there's so many incredible men that I've even been meeting on this journey that I'm like, wow, like, and people who I have come through even just addiction recovery and, coming out the other side of that, they've come out with so much more wisdom and self-assurance and more confidence within themselves. And, I'm trying my best to encourage them to be like, spread this, like, like you are so, you're in such a unique position to be able to lead others. And I think it's so important to have the men contributing in helping other men, moving through that and increasing their mental health well-being.
Yeah, sounds like a really valuable work, Paris. We're not going to stop women. We can only applaud the women that support men in their journey in the large social services organisation and your special organisation. And I guess within that, I do wonder whether it isn't some opportunity to have somebody that's gone on the journey to share some of their journey, which might open up some key things that validate.
I think the lived experience is really important.
And with counselling, the repeated thing, the maximum benefit that people get from counselling is knowing that I'm not the only one that has a problem. So knowing, women, knowing another man has gone through this struggle is very powerful.
Yes.
As much as it is really valuable having women being a therapist, having a man and knowing a man has gone through the vulnerability and the tears and having to sort of rebuild their life after feeling like they've been broken down to rubble is a valuable validation for a man that I think that particular aspect of the journey, I think, really valuable. Part needs to come from a bloke, I believe, in some form and fashion, or even if it's a little testimonial or a little reel, something like that, which reminds men that this is an okay journey for a man. This is a very typical journey for a man.
Yeah, and I watched a really beautiful thing unfold with my partner when he first started going to see a psychologist. He went with a male psychologist because that's what he felt most comfortable with. And he just really started to open up. Like he would come away from those sessions feeling so seen and so heard that it got to the point that, he started talking to his mates about it. And he's like, you should engage, like go get a psychologist, I'll help you find like a really cool guy. Like, it helps, like it works. And he just found it so helpful, and it drastically like changed things for him. Like I saw him get like softer and softer and, more in tune with himself. His communication increased, it was the communication side of things was a game changer. Like now we never fight because he can communicate his feelings first now, which is just amazing. But yeah, it was just really beautiful to watch that unfold and to just see how that male on male connection opened things up for him like that.
Yeah, that's really special. Thanks, Paris. I mean, I was 54 and at that stage I'd finished my 3-year counselling degree, but 2 years after I finished my counselling degree, it made all the difference when I went away to a men's gathering. And there was a validation. I realised that was particularly valuable over and above the training in counselling or was to actually just be in a room with men for 3 days and realise that men are sensitive, loving, and don't need to be competitive, and men are, it was just such a validation of my own journey. One of the things that I found concerning was I thought sensitivity was a weakness, and I kind of covered it up. And to see other men displaying sensitivity validated that, and I now see sensitivity actually as my strength.
Yes.
It's the love I have for the people, and it's the driving force that gets me out of bed in the morning, and it made me love my children. It's not a weakness; it's a strength. As much as it comes with tears.
Yeah, and I'm sure so many men can relate to that. I know that's something that I've heard a lot. But I wanted to ask you another question, John. So for a long time, men were taught their value came from providing and protecting. So does that identity still exist for a man today?
Very much so. Yeah. When we spoke a little bit about that earlier, but certainly in some respects, it's not just a societal thing. I think also the journey down emotions and opening up and being vulnerable and breaking or challenging a stereotype. Sometimes our jobs become a separation from anxiety, so it becomes like a refuge. And I realised that my identity as an engineer was something that I could hide behind as well.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that isn't that actually contributes to an off ramp, if you like, when things get too tricky or too open or too vulnerable or too far away from what their perception is of masculinity. So I believe so, and that issue about we become our career is particularly valid when we get to retirement age, and not just for men, of course.
Yep.
But certainly it's a particular challenge, and it may well be, what I understand is that men often go through a midlife crisis, or I like to think of a midlife awakening, when at 40 and 50 years of age, almost 50, I realised I had more years behind me than in front of me, and pushed me to the path of, if I don't make a change now, I'll never make a change. So I think yes. And not to say that it isn't a beautiful gift that we give to our loved ones, and to respect ourselves, to a practical contribution to our life. We can't do without, of course.
Yeah.
But just making sure we have some balance, and we continue the journey of our own self-awareness. I don't know if I really had a level of self-awareness until I stepped away from engineering and started to explore counselling.
Yeah, because I know even in conversations that I've had with my partner, he runs his own businesses, and I'll also often ask him, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve, long term? And I always get met with the, I don't know, make more money. I honestly, that is the main response I get. And I just think, wow, it's like you don't really think about what you want, or you don't explore that further. And that was something I always thought about. But then I also think often about when I put myself in my partner's shoes, and say, for example, we don't have any kids, not at this point of time, but if we were to have a family, what would those pressures be like as well, to be say the sole income provider for a family? That to me would feel like a big weight. If I put myself in that, if it was me having to do that, I would find that a huge responsibility and a huge amount of pressure. Would you say that's something that men feel on a day to day?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and to the point where I think options to do other things. At one stage, I did explore in my own in my own consideration the idea of actually stopping engineering and working as a teacher, and really we didn't explore that as much as we could have explored it, but it would have gone through a whole process of adjusting our living style, and it's a message that we don't. It's an opportunity that we don't consider, I don't believe, as much as we could. I think we lose ourselves in the task of earning more, and there's always something more that we can buy for our little ones, our young ones, and I think we can lose big chunks of our life. We obviously invest big chunks of our life doing things that earn us good money that mightn't always be, our dream jobs. But I think it's. I think we very quickly lose. We don't prioritise ourselves, I don't think. And you consider when I went from being an engineer and getting paid lots of money to being a counsellor or a voluntary worker at Lifeline, and people were like, "Oh, interesting choice."
Yeah.
But it wasn't. It's the age-old sort of idiot, isn't it? About choosing not doing the Midas thing, choosing something which actually gives you a sense of your own fulfillment. Yes. And it seems that men are more subject to the Midas touch than women are, but maybe that's also part of the stereotype.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So what is it, we've talked about it briefly around particularly the suicide rates, that they've often been a result of relationship breakdown. So what is it about relationships that so many men find hard to navigate? Like, what haven't they been taught?
I think somehow or other, men don't get into those deep and meaningful conversations with their mates like women seem to do. So, I mean, a lot of there's the skills that people learn within that sharing what's happening emotionally and are substantial parts of getting to be close with other people. I think there's many skills around relationships, but one of the big ones is around listening, and that's something that isn't well known, and people think, oh, well, I've just got to keep my mouth shut. But it's much more than that. Yeah. It's much more than that, and listening as I learned in counselling is a stepping stone to building communication, to building empathy, to getting deeper relationships, understanding what's happening with other people, and then understanding what's happening with their children, and supporting them with stepping through consequential thinking, which is a classic discipline strategy for our kids. So it's just a lack of relationship skills within that, and or the priorities that are given to people by virtue of the stereotypes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense, because that's something that I've noticed a lot is, I talk to my mum and my sister like sometimes 2-3 times a day on the phone, and my partner will just be so baffled at how much I talk to my family, and he finds that so strange. He's like, "Gosh, you guys talk a lot." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, we want to talk, we want to chat about all the things, we communicate about everything, could be anything." But he finds that hard to wrap his head around. He finds that very alien, and he can't do that with his own family or his friends. But it's something that I feel like he's getting better with it. But I've known a lot of other women to have experienced that in their relationships as well. It's like you start to notice how men interact with each other compared to how women do. And we have so much emotional depth with each other. Whereas for the men, it's like, it's not really like, how is your day? It's like, how's work? How's work going? What's going on there? Kind of a thing. It's very surface level. Because there'll be times I'd even ask my partner like, "Oh, what's going on in old mate's life at the moment? What's happening with this?" And he'd be like, "I don't know. I didn't ask." And I'm like, okay. So that's something that I've definitely noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a gift, isn't it, just to spend time with each other, and it's when we were growing up, the saying was "talk is cheap," but now I realise that talk is so much more than that. It's sharing, it's connecting, it's learning from each other. It's recognising my own journey is similar to other people's journeys. So a validation of a whole life experience, and research indicates that when we use words, when we put our experience into words, we think at a higher level. And so we're better able to make sense of the things that are happening around us. Every indication is that human beings are a talking species, and we need that to grow, to learn. And it's something, talk is not cheap, but talk is priceless. And it's something that, and I think these things stem from an early age. Research shows that the parents talk more to their daughters than to their sons.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
So it's important to make words, with people and that sort of stuff. And I guess it's also valuable to recognise that some people don't talk as much as others. As much as I talk is a bit of my profession, you would never guess. Is that there are also times when I'm really happy to be silent and, and to listen, and then read a book or something like that, because because I'm not sure what 30 years did to my brain, in the 20 years before I started it, but certainly I've got a very healthy left side of my brain, so I do like to be busy and I think you can recognise the stereotype and the pressures of stereotype and left brain tasks, 40, 60 hours a week. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you just step that easily away from it.
Yes.
And I think the opportunity to go back to a task is a valuable process to take us away from sometimes painful moments or difficulties of relationships or things we don't understand. So many complexities in relationships.
Yes.
That and differences, and it takes time for us it took me time to be able to recognise that I can't manage everything, and or to recognise that if there's something missing in a relationship, then it's up to me to bring it. So there's many things in relationships. It's one of those things that are beautiful, but they're complex.
We as humans are complex. So, of course, it's difficult. It really is. But there's often a belief that showing emotion is weak, which we touched on earlier. So how can we reframe that vulnerability and get more men to take that step to reach out?
I guess there's a couple of things. There's a strategy where you speak to someone, we ask someone, who is it in your life that has been a significant person for you? What is it about that person? Just write down 4 or 5 things. And the upshot of that is to do that twice. What's another person, a second person, the same thing? Write down 3 or 4 things about that person. Now, it's a beautiful values exercise. What they've written down, more than likely, are their values. But it's much more than choose your values from a list of 30 values, all of which are actually, I like all of them. But when you think of somebody that you really value, you start to think of the legacy that they've left to you, how they've made you feel, and how that person has changed your life. And it takes us to a level, as I was working in prison, and there was a question, team up with one of your prison mates and just talk about your partner or ex-partner and their parenting style. And it was like, maybe that's not a good question, So we reframed that and we said, what does your child mean to you? And they all, within moments, dropped to an incredibly deep emotional level. What would you do for your child? They would do everything. They would lay down their life for their child, So, and then the next opportunity was, what's involved in co-parenting? Well, then we
one.
start getting interesting,
Yeah.
Cooperation, consultation and concessions and all sorts of really complex, not easy things. So it means the world to us. Our children mean the world to us. It's complex because we've got different styles, and one style, good cop, bad cop, there's merit in both of them, and we've got different styles, and so it means a lot. Really difficult, and so I think it's sometimes having conversations about the people that have been instrumental in my own life. Speaking about your kids and what would be good for them, those sorts of questions I think can open up, they hit a nerve, and I think one of the things, the media is myopic, and that's its job to be simplistic and not consider complexity. But we've got complexities in our lives and in our relationships. It's important in this process to own that men are violent, that men also are victims. They suffer more violence at the hands of other men than women do, But to recognise that they hurt too, and there's an inner boy there that's been really badly damaged, and it's still hurting, and some healing. Not to say that our darling women haven't also got hurt.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Oh, thank you for sharing that. That was really good insight. So from your experience, what are the most effective ways to build connection and relationship skills in men, especially for those who feel really isolated or emotionally shut down? Like I know, and I can talk on a particular man in my life who I try very hard to have conversations with. And I it's like pulling teeth. I just can't really get anything out of the man. So, yeah, I would love to know.
One of the things that has been the most powerful for me is to recognise strengths.
Yep.
In a person, and to recognise if somebody is quiet. Maybe applaud that.
Okay, yeah.
Why don't you open up? Is actually, it might not actually be his agenda. Counselling is a bit frustrating because you can't go in there with an agenda and go. So I guess it's recognizing that silence has been a really important part of that person's journey, kept him, her safe, and maybe applaud that it's working. That he's some people need words, and just applaud that he doesn't need words. And if we can, the idea is if we can applaud a person where they're at, and there's this stems from Carl Rogers that introduced the humanities, the humanism, which has taken over all our counselling, a big advancement from Freud, and that is to accept a person as they are.
Yes,
or to accept ourselves as we are, and in one aspect, is also accept others as they are. Not that we wouldn't like them to change, but as we accept them, acknowledge where they are in their journey.
Yes.
Then they feel validated and strong enough to make a step towards a change.
Yeah, and that is something that I feel like I have accepted where they're at. But I also, I think there's a part of me that's also very worried. Like I'm concerned. I worry about their mental well-being. So I think that's why I try so hard to dig a little bit and figure out what's going on. But I'm met with a lot of resistance. So it's just very difficult to have any conversation of substance at all.
I remember I've got 3 daughters, and at one stage I was worried. or maybe I was worried about many times. But I realised that when I get worried, I get these little lines around my forehead and furrowed brows, and that it's quite possible that my daughter would see worry in my eyes and in my expression, and think, "Oh, Dad's worried about me. He knows things that I don't know. There must be something wrong with me." So I had to go past worry to a level of belief. I had to believe in and I did, and they're okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, good.
But it's very human to worry, and in some respects maybe it's a bit of a step away from reality to have a vision. You've got this. I know you've got this. You don't need to tell me just yet, but I've seen you've come this far. You've got this, and a belief, as we have that vision, as a dad, it was particularly important because I'm sure it took away the worry, which wasn't helpful.
Yes.
It was a vote of confidence in my daughter, which certainly has come true to my daughters, and it certainly was less for me to worry about in the meantime because it's not helping you in your journey. So
okay. All right, food for thought. Thank you for that, John. So you've worked with men in prisons, in remote communities and in group work. What are some patterns you've seen in how men cope or don't cope with pain and pressure?
Yeah, I think, was it Karen Horney was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud. She come up with this moving away and moving towards. It's a complexity in relationships because you can imagine which gender would be moving away and which one would be moving towards, and it can be frightening for a man when someone is not giving me space when I need to think, and this is overwhelming. And for another person, when their partner is moving away to go in the shed and just trying to work things out, So men traditionally will maybe move away, and it can be frightening for their partners. But they try and wrestle these things even now, wrestle these things on their own, make sense of them. Less often they'll talk through with people, but they'll tend to wait until crisis. And I think it's not that easy. As I said, I was 54, and I slower than some, maybe. I'd have to admit that. But then at 54, I met people. So. Yeah. It's coming. It seems a long time to wait, and thankfully I reverted to work and other things, and maybe too much alcohol, definitely too much alcohol and these sorts of things. So certainly coping mechanisms like alcohol, there's a lot of these unhelpful coping mechanisms like gambling and that sort of stuff, which repeatedly make things even more difficult. Violence. Remains a big issue for us to own and maintain and address, as well as being victims of violence. But we don't talk as much as we could. We certainly and sometimes it's about talking, not necessarily talking about therapy, but connecting, and in the process of connecting. And in prisons, my heart does reach out for these guys because they're in prison. I remember my first journey to prison to meet someone who killed someone. I was so frightened. This man's such a beautiful, gentle man. And there's such beautiful, gentle men in prison. And then when they get out of prison, they're alone.
Yeah.
They are alone in their mum's back room, and they're so vulnerable. So I think recidivism is a big issue, and it's not just that men don't reach out. But certainly we could do better in terms of connecting with each other. Just doing walks together. The Man Walk is a fantastic innovation, starting from the eastern states and certainly here in WA as well. And connection, we could do that a lot better.
Right. So would you say as well, because I know it's come up a bit, but would you say, because connection is obviously the thing that is most important for and needed for men, would you say that connection, it doesn't necessarily mean like having to talk about your emotions? Like it could literally just be being with someone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. In fact, we did a bit of work with the city of Melville, and they've been so fantastic. But their recognition is if it's clear and there's no particular journey to cure, then you're going to get men to attend. You know. And the organisations that as I said, I've realised there's 8 men's groups that I'm connected to in Fremantle, and I'm sure there's others. The central theme of that is connection. It's not therapy. It's about, yes, there's opening up, but people do that so easily and so quickly. Men don't want to talk about it. It's not true. Yeah. Men will talk about things so incredibly quickly and to the point of tears, but just, with a safe space, a non-judgmental space.
Got that connection first.
Yeah, it's connection and this is a cue which can, we're not processing our stuff, but we're enlivening that part of ourselves that need to be hanging around with other blokes around this group around the fire. It was only a little candle, but it's a scaled down version of our community fire.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, John. Something that we have touched on in bits and pieces throughout this episode already, but we can't talk about men's mental health in Australia without talking about domestic violence. So from your experience, what's going underneath that behaviour?
I think the first and foremost is that men accept and own that men are violent. Of course, there's all the other provisos that go in there, but I think it's, without making excuses that men revert to violence. There's indicators that men then suffer violence as well, and that. But I think the big thing around that is to recognise, guys, you've been duped. There's a stereotype out there that you've bitten and you've swallowed and you've made it part of your DNA, and that might contribute to a sense that you are the master of the house or the master of the moment, or you need to display big four-wheel drives in public and that sort of stuff. Set yourself free from that. It's not true. It's not true. One of the things that the media perpetuate is that you're a villain. And boys see it and men see it. It's a simplistic mantra, which isn't countered by Roger Cook called us thugs. Okay, well, certainly if you name and shame, my ethics sort of lectures showed that naming and shaming doesn't work.
No, definitely not. No,
it's it's not unworthy to recognise that you've had early life trauma.
Yeah.
And working with perpetrators of domestic violence, our preventative framework these days doesn't talk about recognising early life trauma, and it doesn't talk about skills acquisition.
Yeah.
These are valuable contributions.
Yes.
To meet our men, our perpetrators of violence and our men with a recognition that they've been hurt, let them off from their stereotype, and to teach them skills,
Yeah.
we've there's organisations trying to work with men that have been told that they shouldn't be spending money on men, and this is not this is archaic, this is illogical, and it's not social justice.
Yes.
We should be respecting our men's humanity, and men should be respecting that within themselves as well. Naming and shaming doesn't work within the media, and we need to be sort of working more towards and giving them the skills, we're told in the media. This is what I was going to say. We're told in the media that men have got the power, but adolescent boys are meeting girls that are much stronger than them. Why are we surprised? There's strong women out there, and they're a blessing to us. The skills and the strengths that men bring are similar, or they're developing in that area, but they're also different. So
yes,
we need to recognise that when it's not about us and them. It's not about comparing the levels of power, but you can see why the manosphere is becoming a horrible blight in our society. And another indicator in the media that men are behaving poorly. But adolescent boys are meeting adolescent girls that are stronger than them and feeling disempowered and confused, and they're not understanding how to embrace differences and their own strengths, and not to be competitive about this. To learn from each other. We've got a lot to learn from our women folk. And there's a lot of beauty within masculinity that isn't typified in the media, and you will get in a heartbeat when you hang out with other blokes. There's the beauty of the connection, the gentleness, the strength, and the supporting. I think men are one of the strengths that men have is their ability sometimes to forego their own values and do it so easily. In terms of earning income and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
But there are many beautiful strengths within men that they should be proud of.
Absolutely.
And to be proud of those and to admire the strengths that our women are continuously bringing to our community.
I feel like we complement each other really well, and this is something why it's one of the main reasons that I've got a male psychologist, because I just find that so helpful for me and my brain. I think having that different perspective on things helps me to see an even bigger picture than what I would see with a female psychologist. And I have found that so invaluable. So I totally get what you're saying with that. And it's the whole reason why I wanted to have this conversation, because yes, domestic violence is a huge thing in Australia and across the world. But as much as I would never justify the actions of men and excuse that behavior, it's still recognizing that there is a man in trouble here that needs some help. And we as a society are not too focused on that. We're more focused on looking after the victim, which rightly so. But if we want to change this narrative and make sure that these things aren't going to continue on, we do need to look further at the man and what he is going through to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, so beautifully said, Paris. It's complex.
It's so complex.
And that can sound like an excuse, but let me just put it another way. I was told that if we acknowledge a man's childhood abuse, or if we teach a man skills, including relationship community skills, self-awareness or emotional regulation, that man will go away and make excuses for their early life behaviour, as opposed to endowing a man with respect that once they have these skills, they will heal and be able to love the people in their life more. The concept of not teaching a man, acknowledging his early life trauma and teaching him skills about relationships and self-regulation and tra-la-la, because he will misuse that is not respectful.
No,
it's not helpful. It's not respectful. No. And we need to come at this issue, recognizing the complexities within that to think that we're going to be able to address it successfully.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, to wrap it up, if someone listening is struggling silently or knows someone who is, what's one message you'd want them to take away from this episode?
You're not alone. Sometimes it can feel like there's no easy way. Oftentimes it's when you're hungry, you're angry or anxious or lonely or tired, HALT. Have a good feed. Be careful with alcohol. Check out in the morning. Check it in the morning and see if it's as bad in the morning, because oftentimes it's not after a good night's sleep. Ring Lifeline. There's some beautiful people in Lifeline. It's not always, and then if you can reach out to someone, oftentimes it's a woman that you feel the most comfortable with, but certainly, as we said a bit earlier, the connection with men helps to remind that men feel these things deeply too. Men feel life deeply and feel frustrations and you're suffering horrible stereotypes and which have taken you away from many opportunities and make it harder for you to accept connections, that sort of stuff. Just recognise you survived this far. You're getting close to a breakthrough.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we go, where can people find some of these resources that you were sharing before? Where could people get their hands on that?
This is available on our webpage, the Blokes book, and there's one for the young blokes as well. Yep. So that's menshealthwa.org.au, or Google the Blokes book. Yep. And that has a whole host of contacts and truths around Ben's journey. So it certainly, as you say, Lifeline, Men's Helpline, Men's Domestic Violence Line. They're not just talking about your violence; they're talking about your journey. So these sorts of things. So
yeah, and maybe try out a men's shed. Get into that. Well, thank you so much, John, for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was a very valuable conversation, not only for me, but I know for many others. So thank you for joining it.
Very welcome, Paris, and congratulations on your work. Well done.
Thank you. Thanks, John.